Officer Nolan Price pinched Commander Isaiah Mercer's Navy identification between two gloved fingers and bent it toward the floodlight. "They sell better ones than this online," he said, loud enough for the sailors and civilian contractors backed up behind the checkpoint to hear. Isaiah held out his hand. "Return the card, officer, verify it through the number on the terminal, and call the duty officer listed on my orders." Price looked past him at the black government sedan parked beside the inspection lane. Isaiah had arrived in service khakis beneath a dark overcoat with silver oak leaves visible at his collar. The uniform should have ended the argument. Instead, Price's gaze lingered on Isaiah's face before dropping to the rank. "Commander," Price said. "Sure." He twisted Isaiah's right arm behind his back and drove him against the security booth. The glass shook. Pain flashed from Isaiah's shoulder to his wrist, but he kept his other hand open where everyone could see it. Harbor Point Naval Terminal began beyond the steel gate, but the outer checkpoint sat on Cityport property. Price was a Harbor Point police officer assigned there under a joint security agreement. He had civilian arrest authority on that strip of pavement, and Isaiah knew that one careless movement could turn an insult into a weapons response. "Do not open the blue envelope," Isaiah said. "It contains controlled exercise material." Price pulled the tamper-evident packet from inside Isaiah's coat. A red band crossed its clasp, along with instructions to contact the naval duty officer before seizure. Price read the warning, then smiled. "Military impersonator carrying restricted documents," he announced into his radio. "Possible breach attempt." Isaiah heard vehicle doors close behind them. 11 SEAL operators had stepped from two unmarked vans in the holding lane, deployment cases at their feet. Senior Chief Daniel Cross moved to the front, his weathered face tightening when he saw Isaiah against the glass. Sir Cross said, "Do you want us to abort?" The laughter vanished from Price's face. His grip loosened for half a second. Isaiah could have ordered Cross to identify the mission in front of every driver, contractor, and raised phone. That might have stopped the arrest. It would also expose the unannounced security evaluation they had spent 4 months protecting. He believed the duty officer would correct the situation within minutes if everyone followed procedure. "Stand down," Isaiah said. "Maintain custody of the equipment. Contact the duty officer through the approved channel." Cross did not move. "Commander." "That is an order." Price recovered quickly. He snapped one cuff around Isaiah's wrist and drew it tight enough to bite skin. Then he looked at the SEALs and spoke into his radio again. "Suspect has accomplices making military claims. Send another unit." The booth operator, a young civilian guard, stared at Isaiah's identification on the counter. A green verification bar had appeared across her terminal. Before she could speak, Price reached through the open window and struck a key. The screen went dark. "System froze," he said. Isaiah saw the guard's expression change, so did Cross. Second patrol car rolled across the outer lane, blocking the vans. Price finished cuffing Isaiah, broke the red band on the blue envelope, and handed the open packet to the arriving officer. "Log that as evidence," he said. "We're taking him downtown." As Isaiah was pushed toward the patrol car, Cross called after him. "Sir, the launch window closes in 30 minutes. Price opened the rear door and forced Isaiah's head below the frame. Behind them, the terminal gate remained shut. The SEAL team remained stranded on the pavement, and the man who had just erased a successful credential check carried Isaiah's mission away. The patrol car smelled of vinyl, stale coffee, and disinfectant. Isaiah sat sideways because the cuffs forced his injured shoulder against the partition. He flexed his fingers one at a time, checking circulation the way he had taught young sailors to assess an injury without panic. His thumb tingled, but it still moved. Through the rear window, he watched Harbor Point disappear behind stacked cargo containers. Cross and the team remained at the checkpoint under his stand-down order. That order protected the exercise, but it had also left Price free to control the first account of what happened. Isaiah had built his career around noticing small failures before they became disasters. He commanded a naval special warfare support unit, but his expertise was operational security, not dramatic raids. 4 months earlier, 2 contractor vehicles had appeared in the terminal's entry records on nights when no Navy cargo was scheduled. Both entries used a manual checkpoint override. Neither had generated the required supervisor review. The unannounced evaluation that morning was designed to determine whether the problem was weak procedure, careless staffing, or deliberate access. Only 6 people knew the full objective. The blue envelope contained 18 numbered pages, including the authorization, testing boundaries, and a list of access records the team was permitted to preserve. Isaiah had counted every page before sealing it. He always counted controlled documents twice. His phone vibrated in the property pouch on the front seat. The screen briefly lit with a message from his 17-year-old daughter, Amara. "Don't forget my interview, you promised." He had planned to leave Harbor Point before noon, change out of uniform, and drive her to a scholarship interview at the Maritime Academy. Since her mother's death 3 years earlier, Isaiah had missed birthdays, school conferences, and one hospital visit because the Navy needed him somewhere else. He had promised Amara this day would be different. The Harbor Point police station, Price pulled Isaiah from the car before a booking officer could bring a lower set of cuffs. Isaiah's right hand had begun to swell. "He reached for my weapon after I challenged the fake credentials," Price told the desk sergeant. Isaiah stared at him. "Your body camera will show that never happened." Price tapped the dark camera on his chest. Battery failed before contact. The desk sergeant glanced at Isaiah's uniform, then at the blue envelope beneath Price's arm. "Has Naval Security confirmed him?" "They confirmed someone with that name exists," Price said. "That doesn't prove this is him, and it doesn't excuse assault." Isaiah asked for medical attention, access to counsel, and immediate preservation of the checkpoint terminal log. The sergeant wrote down the first 2 requests. He did not acknowledge the third. That omission disturbed Isaiah more than Price's insults. Access terminals kept automatic audit records even when their screens went dark. If the station delayed preservation until the next cycle, someone with administrative credentials might be able to bury the exact verification Price had erased. At the property counter, a civilian clerk emptied the envelope while Price stood beside her. She counted the documents and entered the total into the inventory system. 17 pages, she said. Isaiah lifted his head. "Count them again." She did. The result did not change. "There were 18 when Officer Price broke the seal," Isaiah said. "The document control manifest will confirm it." Price leaned close enough that only Isaiah could hear him. "You should have left when I gave you the chance." The clerk's hand stopped above the keyboard, but Price stepped away before she looked up. Then the officer who had arrived after Isaiah was already against the booth entered the booking area carrying a signed witness statement. Isaiah saw the first line as the sergeant accepted it. Commander Mercer initiated the physical confrontation. The officer had not witnessed the beginning at all. Isaiah pointed toward the officer holding the statement. "He arrived after I was already restrained. Check his dispatch time against the checkpoint cameras." The desk sergeant folded the statement and placed it inside a case folder. "You can dispute evidence through your attorney." "That is not evidence. It is a false account you can test in 2 minutes." Price removed Isaiah's oak leaf insignia and placed it in a property bag as if the rank itself were part of the alleged disguise. "Still giving orders," he said. The station nurse arrived with an ice pack and examined Isaiah's swollen wrist through the bars of a temporary holding room. She documented reduced sensation in his thumb and recommended an X-ray. The sergeant approved transport only after booking, leaving Isaiah seated beneath a camera while Price drafted the report outside. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Park entered the station in uniform. As Harbor Point's naval duty officer, she could confirm personnel and mission authorization, but she had no authority over a municipal arrest. She presented a callback number from the regional command center and verified Isaiah's identity in front of the watch commander. "Commander Mercer is exactly who his credentials say he is," Park stated. "He was conducting an authorized evaluation." Price did not apologize. "Then he's a real commander who attempted to force his way through a civilian checkpoint." The accusation shifted so smoothly that Isaiah understood it had never truly depended on his identity. Price amended his report. The supposedly counterfeit card became a credential that had failed to establish local access. The alleged breach became obstruction. The movement Price had caused by wrenching Isaiah's arm became an attempt to reach the officer's weapon. There were details that gave the new story a convincing surface. Isaiah's name had intentionally been withheld from the local visitor roster to preserve the surprise evaluation. His government sedan had not been entered into the city's vehicle system. The checkpoint video had no audio, and its first useful angle showed Isaiah turning as Price grabbed him. Without the preceding seconds or the terminal record, the movement could be described either way. "Release him to Navy custody," Park said. "We will guarantee his appearance." The watch commander shook his head. Harbor Point police were responsible for the outer checkpoint, and an assault allegation required a probable cause review. Isaiah would remain in civilian custody until a judge considered release. Park turned to the property clerk. "I need the controlled packet preserved under Joint Security Protocol. Its manifest lists 18 pages. Price answered before the clerk could. "It was open when I recovered it. 17 pages came into this building." Isaiah saw Park absorb the lie without reacting. "Page 18 identifies the record scheduled for preservation. No one outside the evaluation team was authorized to read it." For the first time, Price's composure cracked. His eyes moved toward the closed case folder on the sergeant's desk. His radio vibrated. He walked into the adjoining corridor, but the glass partition carried pieces of his conversation back into the holding room. "They were checking manual overrides," Price said quietly. "No, the launch was stopped. I handled it." Isaiah could not hear the reply. He did see the name glowing briefly on Price's phone: Tideway Logistics Security. Tideway operated the 2 contractor vehicles that had appeared in the unexplained entry records. When Price returned, he handed the watch commander a supplemental page recommending 3 charges: assault on an officer, obstruction of a security checkpoint, and attempted unauthorized entry into a restricted port facility. Conviction was not required to damage Isaiah. An open felony allegation could suspend his access to classified planning systems and remove him from command while the Navy conducted its own review. The desk phone rang. The sergeant answered, listened, then passed the receiver through the slot to Isaiah. Amara was crying quietly on the other end. The academy had offered to delay her interview by 15 minutes, but she had no ride and no parent present to sign the final application acknowledgement. "I'm sorry," Isaiah said. "Ask Mrs. Dalton next door to take you. I'll explain everything later." "You said today was protected." He closed his eyes. "I know." After the call, the watch commander brought him the completed booking form. The line identifying him as a military impersonator had been crossed out. In its place, Price had written that Isaiah used his authentic rank to intimidate checkpoint personnel after lawful access was denied. Isaiah signed only the line acknowledging receipt. Beneath it, the sergeant stamped the detention hold that would keep him in custody until the following morning. The hospital X-ray showed no fracture, but the physician diagnosed a severe wrist sprain, nerve compression from the cuffs, and a strained shoulder. Isaiah's hand was placed in a rigid brace. Price remained outside the examination room while another officer guarded the door. Before Isaiah was returned to the station, the physician photographed the cuff abrasions and recorded that the injuries matched force applied behind his back. Isaiah asked for a copy. The officer said all paperwork would be placed with his property. It was not there when he arrived at the county detention center. Lieutenant Commander Park met him in the processing corridor with a civilian defense attorney named Camille Reed. Park's controlled expression told Isaiah the professional damage had already begun. "Regional Command temporarily suspended your access to classified planning systems," she said. "Standard procedure while a felony allegation is pending. Cross has been ordered to secure the equipment and return the team to quarters." The exercise was over. The unexplained vehicle entries would remain untested, and whoever had used the manual overrides now knew exactly what the Navy had intended to examine. Camille waited until Park stepped away before speaking. The department released a statement. "They say an unidentified man used military credentials to pressure a port officer, resisted detention, and summoned an armed group to the checkpoint. They were my assigned team." The statement doesn't mention that. A contractor's phone video had already spread online. It began after Price forced Isaiah against the booth and captured Cross asking whether to abort. The clip made it appear that Isaiah had called 11 armed men forward during a confrontation. Comments accused him of using the seals to frighten civilian police and questioned whether he had earned his rank. Isaiah asked to call Amara. She answered on the fourth attempt. Mrs. Dalton had driven her to the academy, but they arrived after the interview panel closed. The admissions office would consider rescheduling only if she submitted an explanation. But then, another student had shown her the arrest video. "Everyone at school can see it," she said. "They're saying you attacked a cop." "I didn't." "I know that, but you always tell me your word matters if you've done everything right." At the detention center, Camille reviewed the evidence summary. Price's report claimed the body camera had failed because its battery was depleted before his shift. The checkpoint's primary camera showed only the struggle from a side angle. The booth operator had not yet given a formal statement, and the second officer claimed to have seen Isaiah reach toward Price's belt. "He could not have seen that," Isaiah said. "His dispatch record will place him several blocks away when contact began." "If they preserve it," Camille replied. She had already sent preservation notices for dispatch audio, vehicle location data, checkpoint video, access terminal logs, body camera records, and the seized envelope. The police department claimed the terminal system belonged to the Port Authority, which replied that the city maintained it. Each institution pointed to the other while the automatic retention cycle continued. Isaiah understood the tactic. No one had to openly destroy a record if everyone delayed long enough for software to erase it routinely. Camille offered him one possible protection. The Navy could classify the exercise details and ask the court to seal related material. That would reduce public exposure and shield operational methods. But it would also make it harder for Isaiah to prove why he had been at the checkpoint and why the missing page mattered. For years, Isaiah had believed discipline meant absorbing unfairness until the proper authority corrected it. That belief had shaped his order to cross. The result was a canceled operation, a compromised packet, and a daughter facing public humiliation without him. "Request the narrowest possible release," he said. "Confirm my authorization, the 18-page manifest, and the records the evaluation targeted. Protect everything else." "The Navy may resist," Park warned when Camille brought her back into the room. "It could expose the terminal's weakness." "The weakness has already been exposed to whoever removed page 18. The following morning, a judge released Isaiah without cash bail, but ordered him to avoid the outer checkpoint and make no direct contact with Price or the civilian booth operator. The restrictions prevented him from inspecting the system or approaching the only neutral witness. Outside the courthouse, cameras crowded the steps. Isaiah said nothing as Camille guided him toward her car. Park intercepted them at the curb with a printed response from the Port Authority. During overnight maintenance, Checkpoint Terminal's local session history had cleared. The successful green verification Isaiah and the booth operator had seen was officially gone. Isaiah folded the notice with his uninjured hand. "Then we stop asking them to correct this quietly." He authorized Camille to challenge the arrest publicly and Park to refer the compromised evaluation to the Navy Inspector General. Isaiah returned home to find his dress uniform hanging over the back of a dining chair. Amara had taken it from the cleaner before her interview. She had also placed his framed commissioning photograph face down on the table so it would not appear behind her during the rescheduled video call with the academy. "I didn't want them recognizing you," she said. The words hurt more than his shoulder. Isaiah started to explain that the charges would collapse once the records were reviewed, then stopped. He had already asked her to trust a process that had erased one record, misplaced a medical report, and accepted a witness statement from someone who arrived late. "You did nothing wrong by being my daughter," he said. "You shouldn't have to hide the picture." Amara looked at his wrist brace. "Neither should you." Over the next 3 days, Camille pursued the records through the criminal case while Park worked through Navy security channels. The city released a copy of the checkpoint video, but it began 7 seconds before Isaiah struck the glass. The earlier segment was labeled unavailable because the camera had been restarting after a software update. Price's report described that gap as unfortunate but irrelevant. The police department also defended the missing terminal history. Its attorney said the local session had been cleared during scheduled maintenance applied to every checkpoint workstation. No individual officer had ordered the deletion. On paper, the explanation sounded ordinary. Isaiah studied the response at Camille's office. They keep saying local history. Camille looked up. Because that is what we requested. The terminal doesn't verify military credentials by itself. It sends an encrypted request to the Navy Identity Gateway. The booth can clear its own screen, but it cannot erase the gateway's transaction record. Park had authority to request that limited record because the compromised exercise created a Navy security incident. She could not access city video or police personnel files, but she could retrieve confirmation that a credential query reached the military system and what result was returned. That afternoon, she delivered a certified gateway report to Camille and the prosecutor. Isaiah's card had been queried at the Harbor Point checkpoint. The Navy system authenticated it as active, matched it to Commander Isaiah Mercer, and returned a green verification result before Price reached through the booth window. The record did not prove what Price believed when the encounter began. It did prove that his report omitted a successful identity confirmation and that the terminal had not frozen on its own. Camille filed the report with a motion asking the court to reconsider the restrictions and compel immediate preservation of all related systems. The prosecutor did not dismiss the charges, but she withdrew the attempted unauthorized entry count pending further review. For the first time, an official outside the Navy acknowledged that Price's account might be incomplete. The department responded within hours. Price claimed he had seen the green result but believed the approaching tactical team created a new threat. He said he powered down the terminal to prevent anyone inside the booth from opening the gate during a possible coordinated breach. His union attorney described the decision as emergency judgment under uncertain conditions. It was a stronger defense than pretending the verification never happened. It also allowed Price to concede one lie while protecting the assault accusation. The civilian booth operator submitted her first formal statement through the Port Authority's lawyer. She confirmed that the screen had turned green and that Price had deliberately shut it down. But she wrote that her view of the physical contact was blocked by the window frame. She could not say whether Isaiah reached toward Price's belt. The statement helped, but not enough. The prosecutor continued to rely on the second officer's account and the incomplete camera angle. That evening, Regional Command restored Isaiah's access to administrative email but kept him away from classified planning. He remained removed from command. Cross was permitted to call him only about personal welfare, not the halted evaluation. "I should have ignored the stand-down order," Cross said. "No, you followed it. I gave it because I thought restraint would make the facts impossible to distort." "What do we do now?" Isaiah looked at the photograph Amara had finally returned to the shelf. "We document what they cannot talk around." Camille called before he could put down the phone. The court's preservation order had forced the police department to export Price's body camera management record. It showed that his camera had left its charging dock with most of its battery available. More important, the device had not failed. Someone had manually powered it down 47 seconds before Price placed Isaiah against the security booth. The body camera record changed the prosecutor's posture, but it did not settle the case. Price's union attorney argued that the power button could have been pressed accidentally while he adjusted his vest. The management system recorded the shutdown command, not the finger that issued it. Camille answered by comparing the shutdown with Price's written report. He had claimed the battery died before his shift, yet the device had been assigned to him, and communicating with the system until less than a minute before the encounter. The prosecutor ordered a formal review rather than accept the department's explanation. That review gave Camille permission to interview the civilian booth operator through Port Counsel. Her name was Mara Ortiz, and she arrived with a union representative, twisting an employee badge between her fingers. She had worked the checkpoint for 9 years and supported 2 children. Losing her clearance would cost her the only job that provided their health insurance. "I did not see who moved first," Mara said. "I won't say I did." "We are not asking you to," Camille replied. Isaiah sat at the far end of the conference table because the no-contact order prevented him from addressing her directly. Camille showed Mara the Navy Gateway confirmation and the body camera power record. Mara read both documents twice. Then she asked her representative whether truthful testimony could violate a supervisor's instruction. The representative told her it could not. Mara explained that Price had visited the booth after Isaiah was taken away. He told her the terminal had frozen and instructed her to submit a malfunction ticket. When she refused because she had watched him turn off the display, the port's night supervisor submitted the ticket using her operator number. The ticket was time-stamped hours later, but described the failure as occurring before Isaiah's arrival. "Why didn't you include that in your first statement?" Camille asked. "Port counsel gave me a list of questions. The ticket wasn't on it." The failure was larger than one dishonest officer. Harbor Point's joint security contract divided responsibility across the police department, Port Authority, and Navy. Officers controlled the outer lane. Civilian operators handled credentials. City technicians maintained the terminals. Each agency could access one piece of the record, while no single compliance officer reviewed the entire chain. Price had learned where those boundaries created blind spots. Mara also identified a record no one had requested. Every manual gate override generated a transaction in the terminal, but the port copied those transactions into a separate reconciliation file used to calculate contractor access fees. Clearing a local session did not erase the billing copy. Under the court's preservation order, a port accountant produced the reconciliation files. Isaiah could not inspect classified access data while suspected, so Camille and an approved Navy security analyst reviewed them. The files showed that Price's operator credential had authorized the 2 unexplained Tideway vehicles months earlier. On both nights, the required supervisor approval field contained the same generic code. The finding established access and connection, not purpose. Credentials could be shared. The generic code might reflect lazy supervision rather than corruption. But Price's phone conversation with Tideway, his removal of the page identifying override records, and the false malfunction ticket now formed a sequence instead of isolated irregularities. Camille sent the prosecutor a supplemental evidence memorandum. By the following afternoon, the police department placed Price on paid administrative leave and ordered him to surrender his checkpoint credential. The assault and obstruction charges against Isaiah remained pending, but the prosecutor postponed the preliminary hearing to examine possible evidence tampering. The department publicly described Price's leave as routine. Privately, someone informed him that Mara had cooperated. She found out when her employee access stopped working. The Port Authority said her clearance had been suspended because she had discussed restricted system procedures during an active investigation. Without that access, she could not work her scheduled shifts. Isaiah learned about the suspension during a physical therapy appointment. His thumb was still numb, and the therapist warned that recovery could take months. Camille told him Mara's union planned to appeal, but the process would not restore her paycheck immediately. "My order already cost my team the operation," Isaiah said. "Now telling the truth is costing her family." He could not contact Mara, but he asked Camille to convey one message through her representative. The Navy would support a lawful request confirming that her interview had been authorized under the court order. Before Camille could send it, Park called. Investigators had compared the billing files with Price's duty schedule. The 2 Tideway overrides were not the only matches. Price's credential had opened the gate for 9 unlisted contractor vehicles over 14 months, and everyone carried the same supervisor code. The 9 vehicle entries followed the same pattern. Each Tideway truck arrived during Price's shift, lacked a matching delivery appointment, and passed through the outer gate under a manual override. The billing system classified all 9 as routine maintenance vehicles, which reduced their access fees and kept them off the exception report reviewed by Navy security. Park's analyst compared the entries with the limited scheduling records Isaiah had been authorized to examine before his suspension. None of the trucks had been expected. 3 entered on nights when the restricted pier was officially closed to contractors. The records did not show what the trucks carried. They did show why the missing page mattered. Page 18 listed the billing reconciliation file among the first records the evaluation team planned to preserve. Whoever removed it knew precisely which overlooked system could expose the overrides. Camille obtained Price's approved outside employment disclosure from the police department. It showed that Tideway Logistics had paid him for weekend security consulting for nearly 2 years. The work itself was legal and had been authorized by his watch commander. The approval form prohibited Price from taking police action that benefited the company or accessing municipal systems on its behalf. Price's attorney argued that the relationship proved nothing improper. Tideway employed several off-duty officers, and Price's checkpoint assignment had been made by department supervisors, not requested by him. The manual overrides, the attorney added, could not be attributed to Price personally because officers shared workstation sessions during shift changes. That defense exposed another failure. The joint security agreement required unique credentials, but supervisors had permitted a generic approval code to circulate for years because individual logins slowed traffic. Internal audit warnings had been treated as technical recommendations rather than security violations. The arrangement protected the department from staffing complaints and helped the port move commercial faster. No single official had designed the entire vulnerability. Some had ignored it to preserve the police contract. Others feared disrupting port revenue. A few believed experienced officers could be trusted with shared access. Price had turned their compromises into cover. The same reconciliation files contained secondary screening records. During the 14 months in which the Tideway vehicles passed without inspection, Price had ordered extended checks on dozens of drivers whose paperwork was valid. The longest delays fell disproportionately on black sailors, contractors, and delivery workers. His reports repeatedly described them as evasive or aggressive, even when no citation followed. Those records could not prove what was in Price's mind when he saw Isaiah. They did reveal a consistent double standard. Favored vehicles moved through undocumented, while black drivers with legitimate credentials were treated as threats. The city announced an internal review but refused to release Price's prior reports, citing personnel confidentiality. The Port Authority defended Mara's suspension as necessary to protect restricted procedures. At a contract committee meeting, officials warned that public allegations could endanger the upcoming renewal of the joint security agreement and hundreds of local jobs. Isaiah watched the meeting online with Amara beside him. His wrist brace rested on the table between them. "They keep talking like the contract is the victim," she said. "Contracts cannot feel pain," Isaiah replied. "People protecting them can make other people pay it." Amara's academy interview had been rescheduled. When the panel asked how she handled public pressure, she told them she had learned that silence could look disciplined while still helping the wrong person. Isaiah recognized the lesson she had drawn from him, and it was not the one he had intended to teach. Camille's next filing challenged the second officer's witness statement. Dispatch and vehicle location records, already covered by the preservation order, placed his patrol car more than a mile from Harbor Point when Price first radioed the alleged breach. The earliest he could have reached the checkpoint was after Isaiah had been pinned against the booth. Faced with the timing, the officer amended his statement. He now claimed he had not witnessed Isaiah reach for Price's weapon, but had misunderstood Price's description while writing the report. The prosecutor referred the false statement for administrative review and withdrew the assault charge against Isaiah. The obstruction count remained. Price still argued that Isaiah refused a lawful order to leave and escalated the encounter by summoning an armed team. The incomplete video showed Cross and the operators behind him, while the missing beginning concealed Price bending the ID, ignoring the green verification, and initiating force. Camille warned Isaiah that defeating the remaining charge would require more than demonstrating that Price lied elsewhere. They needed proof tying him to the altered evidence or restoring the missing beginning of the video. The court ordered the city to produce the checkpoint recording in its original format. Instead, the department supplied the same shortened export it had already released to the public. Its technical affidavit claimed the original had been overwritten during routine storage rotation. Park examined the file's metadata within the scope permitted by the court. The video had not been automatically exported when the incident occurred. Someone had created the shortened copy from an administrative workstation inside Harbor Point Police Headquarters 6 hours after Isaiah's arrest. The user field contained no officer's name. It carried the same generic supervisor code found on all 9 Tideway overrides. The shared supervisor code gave Price room to counterattack. His union attorney held a press conference and argued that any officer, port supervisor or technician, could have approved the tideway vehicles or created the shortened video. He accused the Navy of using a criminal case to conceal a poorly coordinated exercise that had placed civilian officers in danger. The department released selected pages from Isaiah's planning memorandum. One line instructed the SEAL team to arrive without prior notice. Missing from the release was the authorization explaining that the team would remain outside the gate unless Isaiah admitted them. On television, the cropped sentence sounded like an order to surprise armed civilians. Price gave an interview through his attorney. He said he had doubted Isaiah's credentials because no commander appeared on the local roster, and 11 equipped operators had emerged as he attempted a lawful detention. He admitted turning off the body camera, claiming he had tried to restart a malfunctioning device. He denied removing a page, altering video, or knowingly allowing unauthorized trucks through the gate. Commander Mercer wants people to believe rank makes him immune from checkpoint rules, the attorney said. Officer Price treated him like any other unidentified person, creating a security risk. The statement gave the public a simpler story than a divided security system with shared passwords and competing jurisdictions. Regional Command opened a separate review of Isaiah's exercise planning. His authorization remained valid, but reviewers questioned his decision not to disclose the operation after Price challenged him. Isaiah's temporary removal from command became indefinite. A promotion board deferred consideration of his next assignment. The cost spread to Mara. The Port Authority terminated her for failing to report the alleged system malfunction immediately, and for discussing access procedures outside her chain of command. Her union filed a grievance, but she lost her health coverage at the end of the month. Then the police department announced that page 18 had been found beneath a document scanner in the booking office. Officials described the missing page as a clerical mistake caused by the confusion surrounding Isaiah's arrest. The property clerk was blamed for counting incorrectly, even though her electronic inventory had recorded 17 pages twice. The recovered sheet was placed into evidence without any record showing who found it or when it had reached the scanner. The department argued that its return eliminated any basis for accusing Price of removing controlled material. Camille called it contaminated evidence. Price's attorney called it vindication. The city offered Isaiah a resolution before the obstruction hearing. The prosecutor would dismiss the final charge, and the department would correct its first public statement. In exchange, Isaiah would release the city from civil claims, avoid public accusations against individual officers, and ask the Navy Inspector General to limit its referral to technical security failures. The agreement offered nothing to Mara and required no admission that Price had lied. Accepting it could restore Isaiah's clearance and place him back before the promotion board. It could also end the online attacks that followed Amara to school. Camille laid the unsigned agreement on his kitchen table. No lawyer can promise what happens if you reject this. The video gap still protects him. The shared code protects everyone. Amara stood in the doorway but did not tell him what to choose. Isaiah thought about the stand-down order. He had made it to protect the mission, believing the institution would protect the truth. A second quiet choice might save his career, while leaving every weakness in place for the next person, without a team behind him. He pushed the agreement back. Tell them I will discuss a dismissal without silence, nothing else. 2 days later, the prosecutor withdrew the offer and announced she would proceed with the obstruction hearing. The city asked the judge to exclude evidence about the tideway overrides as unrelated to whether Isaiah obeyed Price's order at the checkpoint. Camille needed a direct link to the encounter. Isaiah studied the metadata from the shortened checkpoint video again. The export began at a new visual frame, but its internal sequence number did not reset. 7 seconds of numbered frames existed before the first image the city had produced. The recorder indexed those frames, Isaiah said. Even if the active drive overwrote them later, the system should identify which storage mirror held the original segment when this copy was created. Camille's forensic consultant confirmed the logic. The checkpoint recorder used 2 mirrored drives. City records claimed both had overwritten the footage, yet hardware inventory showed that one drive had been removed on the afternoon of Isaiah's arrest after a reported failure. The serial number appeared in the same maintenance affidavit the city had used to explain the missing segment. The judge ordered the city to produce the removed drive for independent examination. Police attorneys first said it had been recycled, then corrected themselves after the court requested disposal records. The drive was sitting in a locked cabinet at police headquarters. Price's attorney moved to delay the hearing and warned that any recovered data could be corrupted. The judge denied the request but allowed both sides to observe the forensic process. On the morning the drive was delivered to the examiner, Mara received an anonymous envelope at her apartment. Inside was a copy of her termination letter and a photograph of her children leaving school. She called Camille instead of withdrawing. The public obstruction hearing was scheduled for the following week with the recovered drive, Price's report, Mara's testimony, and the department's handling of page 18 all subject to examination. The independent examiner recovered the missing frames from the removed mirror drive. The footage was silent, but its sequence was complete. It showed Price studying Isaiah's identification, holding it beneath the booth light, and bending it between his fingers. Isaiah remained several feet from the gate, with both hands visible. Mara's terminal turned green. Price looked directly at the screen. He reached through the window and shut it down. Then he switched off his body camera, stepped behind Isaiah, and seized his arm without any movement toward the officer's belt. The SEAL operators did not leave their vans until after Isaiah had been driven against the glass. Price's central defense collapsed in less than a minute of restored video. The team he described as the reason for his emergency decision had not appeared when he initiated force. Isaiah had not summoned them forward. Cross approached only after seeing his commander restrained. The city challenged the recovery immediately. Its attorney argued that a drive removed from service and stored without evidentiary controls could not be trusted. The examiner acknowledged the imperfect custody but explained that each camera's segment carried an integrity value created by the recorder. The recovered frames matched the index preserved in the shortened export, including the 7-second sequence gap Isaiah had identified. Altering those images would have broken that match. The prosecutor reviewed the authenticated footage before the obstruction hearing and filed a motion dismissing the final charge. The judge granted it with prejudice, preventing the city from filing the same allegation again. She also ordered the police department to preserve the drive, the recovered page, and every administrative record for the investigations that would follow. Isaiah walked from the courtroom without charges for the first time since the arrest. Reporters crowded the steps, expecting him to condemn Price or celebrate the dismissal. He held up his braced hand. The video proves I did not obstruct that checkpoint. It does not explain 9 undocumented vehicles, a missing controlled page, or why a truthful employee lost her job. Dismissing my case is the beginning of accountability, not the end. The full recording spread more quickly than the edited phone clip. Viewers could see Price dismiss an authenticated Navy credential before any SEAL operator approached. The department removed its original statement from its website, but archived copies preserved what officials had claimed. 3 days later, the Harbor Point Council scheduled a public hearing on the joint security contract. Price attended with his union attorney and invoked his right not to answer questions that could affect the criminal investigation. His attorney maintained that the restored video concerned the arrest only and did not prove Price had entered a single override. That distinction was legally important. Isaiah did not ask the council to ignore it. Instead, he presented the evidence as a timed sequence. The reconciliation files placed Price on duty for all 9 Tideway entries. His unique operator credential initiated each override, while the shared supervisor code completed approval. His approved outside employment established the company relationship but did not prove misconduct by itself. Then Camille introduced telephone records obtained under the Criminal Preservation Order. Tideway Security Office had contacted Price's personal phone within 20 minutes of 8 of the 9 overrides. On the morning Isaiah was arrested, the same office called him after he opened the envelope containing page 18. The records showed contact, not conversation content, but they independently connected Price to Tideway at every critical point. Mara testified that Price ordered her to report a system freeze she had not witnessed. The port's false maintenance ticket was displayed beside the Navy Gateway record and the body camera shut down. Her voice shook only when she described the photograph of her children. The Port Authority's attorney suggested that Mara had changed her account after losing her job. "I lost my job after I gave the account," she replied. "That is why the order matters." The property clerk testified next. Her inventory showed 17 pages when the packet entered the station. She had counted twice because Isaiah challenged the number. No supplemental entry documented the sudden discovery of page 18 beneath the scanner. Price's attorney repeated that shared codes and broken procedures created uncertainty. Isaiah agreed. "That uncertainty is not a defense of this contract," he told the counsel. "It is evidence that the contract cannot protect the terminal." Officer Price exploited the same gaps that supervisors tolerated, but tolerance did not make his choices automatic. A system failed, and an individual chose how to use that failure. The council voted to suspend the contract renewal and place the outer checkpoint under temporary joint control while an independent audit proceeded. It also ordered Mara's termination reviewed by an outside labor investigator. The police chief announced that Price's paid leave had become an unpaid suspension pending disciplinary charges for false reporting, improper force, and evidence policy violations. The county prosecutor referred the Tideway records and the page's chain of custody to the state attorney general because the local department's supervisors were potential witnesses. As the hearing room emptied, Cross approached Isaiah in civilian clothes. He did not salute inside the chamber, he simply extended his hand. "Awaiting your next order, Commander." Isaiah looked toward Mara, the property clerk, Camille, Park, and Amara. None of them had needed his rank to recognize what happened. "This time," he said, "we decide together." The investigations did not end together. 6 weeks after the council hearing, an outside labor examiner ruled that Mara had been terminated in retaliation for protected testimony. The Port Authority reinstated her with back pay and restored the health coverage her family had lost. She declined to return to the booth. Instead, she accepted a newly created compliance position that allowed her to review malfunction reports without answering to checkpoint supervisors. The anonymous photograph of her children was never tied to Price, Tideway, or a port employee. No charge was filed. The city funded temporary security for her family, and the unexplained threat remained listed as an open investigation rather than being quietly forgotten. The Navy completed Isaiah's command review 2 months later. Investigators confirmed that the evaluation had been authorized and that the SEAL team followed lawful stand-down instructions. They also found that Isaiah could have disclosed a limited verification phrase without compromising the operation. His decision not to do so violated no order, but the review described it as an avoidable operational risk. Isaiah accepted that conclusion. He no longer confused composure with silence. Regional Command restored his clearance and offered to return him to the same post. He requested a different assignment, leading the joint team redesigning Harbor Point's security procedures. His promotion remained deferred until the next annual board. For once, he did not measure the decision by what it cost his career. The state attorney general's investigation lasted almost a year. Analysts could not prove who had entered the shared supervisor code or what every Tideway trucker carried. They declined to charge Price with the vehicle overrides or removal of page 18 because the evidence did not eliminate reasonable alternative access. They did charge him with falsifying his arrest report and unlawful use of force. The restored video, Navy Gateway record, body camera shutdown, and false witness timeline contradicted his account independently. Price pleaded guilty to falsifying a public record and a reduced assault count. He received county confinement followed by supervised probation, and the state certification board revoked his authority to work as a police officer. After a full disciplinary hearing and union appeal, Harbor Point terminated him. The second officer received a suspension for submitting the false witness statement and was required to complete integrity retraining. The watch commander was demoted for approving shared credentials, ignoring preservation requests, and releasing a misleading public account. Several officers who had objected internally remained employed and later helped revise department policy. Tideway denied requesting unlawful entry. Because the company could not produce valid appointments for the 9 vehicles, the port revoked its access permit and imposed civil penalties for false classifications. Investigators never established the contents of the trucks, so officials stated that limitation publicly instead of inventing a more dramatic crime. The city and Navy replaced the joint security contract. Shared supervisor codes were abolished. Every override required 2 individually authenticated users, and billing copies were automatically preserved outside the port network. Body cameras generated an alert when powered down during an assigned checkpoint shift. Screening patterns were reviewed for racial disparities, and civilian operators received independent whistleblower protection. 18 months after the arrest, Harbor Point settled Isaiah's civil claim. The agreement paid his documented medical expenses, lost professional opportunities, and legal costs. It contained no confidentiality clause. The city published a correction acknowledging that his credentials had authenticated before Price used force and that the SEAL team had never threatened civilian officers. Isaiah's shoulder recovered, but 2 fingers still tingled after long periods of writing. Physical therapy taught him to stop before pain became damage, a lesson Amara noticed he was finally applying outside the clinic as well. She was admitted to the Maritime Academy the following fall. On orientation morning, Isaiah arrived early, wearing a dark suit instead of a uniform. He carried her bags with his left hand and kept his promise to remain until every form was signed. "You know I can carry one," Amara said. "I know, I'm practicing being present." Later that year, she attended the dedication of Harbor Point's rebuilt checkpoint. Mara stood inside the new compliance booth, reviewing the first live audit. Camille and Park watched from the visitor area. Crosswayed beside 2 vans with the same team that had once stepped onto the pavement behind their handcuffed commander. Isaiah approached the inspection lane carrying another sealed blue envelope. This evaluation was still unannounced to the officers being tested, but the verification protocol was shared, limited, and clear. No one had to reveal the mission to establish that he belonged there. The new officer accepted Isaiah's identification, placed it flat on the reader, and waited. A green bar appeared on Mara's screen. The system copied the result to an independent archive, and the officer returned the card without bending it. "Identity confirmed, Commander. The gate is ready when you are." Isaiah looked back at Cross and the operators. 18 months earlier, he had ordered them to remain silent because he believed authority would eventually rescue the truth. Now every person at the checkpoint knew who could question a decision, how to preserve a record, and where to report pressure without losing a livelihood. He did not give the order immediately. He turned to Mara, waited for her confirming nod, and invited Amara to stand beside him. Only then did Isaiah authorize the gate to open, with his team behind him and his daughter no longer left waiting somewhere else.